I guess I think I'm going to pause here a minute because Don and I participated in a session that was convened by Alan Blair, the EDC, and some other folks. And Alan, I hate to put you on the spot, but maybe you can just say a word or two about that meeting for us.
Well, thanks, Dan. And the others who were present there, Bill Messner from Holyoke Community College, Kathy, and Tim and Burke. Bill Ward, please feel free to jump in. I felt that I wasn't sure what the conversation was going to be. Frankly, Don had a pretty good idea of the questions he wanted to ask, but the people present were representing just about all of the colleges in Western Massachusetts. And Chancellor Holub from UMass actually extended the invitations and was present. Bill was present. And so we hadn't had a group like that together in one room before, so for this kind of conversation. But as it turned out, after 2 hours, I think there was an agreement that although we have great colleges and great brands that are internationally known, we don't really collaborate in the true sense of collaboration in a way that Don defines collaboration, such that as a region we would be noted for the way the colleges work together and that the access to these schools is seamless and easy. So I think that was one realization that we all had, and it was a positive realization. The second was that the group got some education around what, from an economic development point of view, higher education, and actually the pre-K through 16 system, needs to be able to provide from the point of view of data to those who are interested in the market. And the parallel universe for that is sites and buildings and infrastructure and permitting. That's something that site selectors look for, but the education infrastructure is increasingly as important as those things. And so how do we position this group and generate the data and information in a quick and seamless way that can respond to those requests? And I think we agreed that we have pieces of it, but we don't have all of it. And then we agreed that we have some elephants in the room all the time when we talk about pre-K through 12 or 16. Those are basically at the public education level in our municipalities, and it's not just confined to Holyoke. It's Springfield, it's parts of Chicopee. I mean, you name the communities who have higher dropout rates than they want, who have pools of unskilled people who live in those communities who are unemployable. Those problem systems are everybody's problem. And I think we came out of that meeting recognizing, at least among that group, that it's everyone's problem to solve. And the simple practical reason why we need to look at it that way is that the data that indicates quality is available to everybody on the internet today. So that a site selector might be looking in the Northeast and looking at Western New England and looking at Western Massachusetts can easily find MCAS data, dropout rate information, and use that as a proxy for the quality of the workforce in the marketplace. And because they can do that without ever talking to us, we never know that we've been passed over. And so solving those problems is extremely important from a workforce quality point of view, to be able to demonstrate to people who are looking for generational proof that they can find a workforce over time after making a huge investment somewhere in the market is a high priority. And this group, I think, kind of walked away feeling there maybe is something that as a group they could do more aggressively about that, and as a region more aggressively about that in each of those municipalities or wherever the problems exist. So those are some of my observations from the meeting, and I'm happy to.
I want to respond to the gentleman from Cisco. He's talking about people in their early 20s to mid-30s. They're really not so concerned about education for their children right now. They're more concerned about a hip, affordable place to live. They're more concerned, talking green, being able to walk to work. They're concerned about having a live-work situation. And how are you going to create those live-work situations if nobody has money to develop? And if they do develop, it's very expensive. The majority of people that are coming to Holyoke looking for spaces and work want to live and work in the space, not unlike what generations of people ago did. They had the ability to live and work, and then they expanded. If it comes to education, they'll move to Longmeadow. I recently, last May, hosted a group of graduates from Hampshire College, okay? What they were going to do, where they want to go, what they want to do. Is money the motive? No. Actually doing something is the motive. What were the opportunities here in Holyoke? Very few. What could I offer them? Very little. They had big dreams, but I could offer them very little.
Dan, let me just wanted to put that out there. On each of these, I hope you see a potential project. We're not going to drill down on each of these, but I'm called on Alan in this case because if you hear a project emerging, you remember what Barry said last time. You go to certain other regions in the country, and one of the first teams that you meet are the C-level, chancellor level, president level, locked at the hip, ready to deliver on the entire talent supply chain all the way to pre-K and for lifelong learning. That is an asset. The C-level, chancellor level, president's level is an asset if they're on the same page together, and that's what the team was confronting. And that is an example of the kind of project that could come together. James, coming to you. Introduce yourself.
Thanks. I'm Jim Carosa. I'm from the University of Massachusetts, and my chancellor called the meeting. I was just there sort of observing and listening, and I do agree with Alan. There was a discussion about how, as a region, we don't maybe compete as well with, say, Chapel Hill or Columbus, Ohio, that has a very integrated system. So I think that's one of the challenges that that group is going to take up. But I wanted to come back to the question of projects that you just brought up, Don. And that is, how are we going to define what level of projects we're going to be shooting for in this group right here around the table? Because if it's the question of how are we going to improve MCAS scores sort of across the board in all the communities that you mentioned, how are we going to, provide transitions from one sector of education to the next, to the next, to the next, we can make our project incredibly huge, right? And I think one of the things that I've heard from some of the questions is a disconnect between these very high-level goals, and it'll take us decades to get there, versus the smaller, sort of shorter-term, maybe a little bit more well-defined goals that we can do in the short term.
And that's what I'm going to be insisting on, because let's play it out with leaders of the talent supply, and you can call it whatever you like, but lifelong learning, that team is working together. I would rather them start with what's in Alan and Kathy's pipeline and to engage there to close a deal first, and then start looking at the generational issues as a part of their portfolio. So I think in every case for project, we find that near-term opportunity, from a permit to engaging with an actual CEO to make the right impression. I'm with you all the way. Now,
Don,
I'm going to do what I think you want me to do. Is we have 40 minutes to go, and it is important that we look at each of these, so I'm going to try to balance the conversation with Dan getting through these key things, because you need to sleep on this and think about it in the weeks to come. Is that okay?
Yes.
All right, thanks.
All right. So if there's any other comments or questions about the last two slides, which were basically a repeat of what we talked about, and for the task force are a repeat of what's in the draft document that went out, where I will, for the first time, if it is for the first time, it won't be the last, remind you that we will want comments over the next, say, 10 days on that draft document. So please do so. If not, let's keep going. And Eric, did you have something? I did. Okay, sorry.
Well, David's mentioned twice essentially the resources that are, I mean, you said cost as well, but I'm going to skip over the cost for a second. You mentioned resources available essentially for startups or businesses that are expanding. And it may be implicit in there somewhere. And if it didn't come out of the analysis, that's fine. But it did strike me that there's an awful lot in there either about sort of the innate conditions that enable economic growth or attraction-related stuff. And if there isn't, there should be some sort of... Okay, I'll stop. But I just thought, but also I was trying to do something to help David know that his comments were resting someplace and weren't just being blown into the ether.
And also, Councilor Bacon, do you have a question? I know you had your hand up.
Oh, that's okay. I'll hold it till they get through their slides.
Bill?
Bill Ward, Regional Employment Board. Without getting into too much detail right now, I mean, I think at some time, since these are going to be indicators and key guides, that maybe on the side, a more clear description of what each one of these indicators
Sure, yep.
is very important, very important. There's nothing in here, for example, on labor force participation rate. That is to say, the population, what percentage of it is working. That's a key indicator many times in communities, and maybe you looked at that. Second question is, at another time, perhaps, you may want to explain a bit how you arrived at these target numbers. I mean, I'm sure I don't think you have to get into the actuarial process, but I'm sure there must have been some thought when you looked at some percentage increase in Holyoke versus a percentage increase in the region. So I think at some time when we focus more on these indicators, it would be helpful for us to understand that.
Yeah, and I'll just comment briefly. I'm an economist by training, so we like to say that, you know, it's a science and built by math, but there's always art with the science. So where we could, we tried to go off some other, you know, trends or growth rates, or see, you know, can Holyoke or the region get up to a certain percentage of the state. So that was the you know, the basic strategy. In some cases, it's like, well, you know, there actually isn't a great comparable metric for Holyoke on you know, employment growth itself, but maybe we can back into it by thinking about, you know, how many jobs would we need to help lower the unemployment rate. So, you know, you're right, there was some thinking there. And
That needs to be a part of our workshop.
yeah.
Hello, yeah, you know, this is good. It's good. I used to say Holyoke's problem, it's the world's problem. It's not Holyoke's problem. And for the immediate next 3 years, okay, what do we have to accomplish in the 3, 4, 5, 6 block radius of where we are right now?
Right.
What do we have
Yep.
to accomplish? Because
Yes.
if we don't, people are knocking on my door looking for live work. They're coming from California, they're coming from New York, they're coming from Boston, they're coming from all over the place. They're coming from Berlin. And they're here, and I have nothing to offer them. So for the next 3 years, after the high-speed, you know, computer center opens up, what will be here?
Well, that's
Young
our work.
Young people are not so concerned about the dropout rates. They're coming from other places.
Okay.
They're more concerned about their physical space and that it's affordable. And we can't offer that today.
Thank you. Over here, and then over there to you, Alan.
I have a couple questions, and I'll try and speak up. I thought your proposal and approach to projecting the population increase by about 20% is interesting, and I have a couple comments on that. One, you have total jobs at 21,000, and you have 38,000 population. Holyoke has more jobs than a labor force participation rate would indicate. So just because jobs are increasing in the city of Holyoke does not mean those jobs, unemployment is going down, because Holyoke is a regional employer. There's more jobs here than residents, even though it has a high unemployment rate. And that disconnect is not shown by these metrics, and I think it's critical. The other issue
No,
is if
can
you...
I jump in just?
No, let me
Oh,
finish
okay.
and then I'll yield.
Okay.
On the population, if you are going to project a 20% increase, is your strategy to lowering poverty and decreasing unemployment a dilution strategy, or is it a pull up the 4 downtown census tracts strategy? And I think those are fundamental questions, and they're interrelated, but they both have to be addressed.
I think those are good points, because to your first one, when we tried to look at what would job growth mean to lowering the unemployment rate, we had to take into account the fact that there are, as you said, lots of people who actually commute into Holyoke for the job. So it's not as simple as just saying, oh, let's grow 2,000 jobs and all of them will be Holyoke resident-based workers. So it makes the calculations a little bit more complicated. But I think it's the reality, and we need to do a good job of demonstrating what that relationship. And why don't we? I heard your comment. Yeah. Right, and we'll get into. I think it's both. Not that I mean, I think what it is that we're trying to both grow and provide job opportunities for the existing residents, and we're trying to become more attractive for both business and other residents to move in. I think it's a combination. If people fundamentally think that's wrong or have a different perspective, you know, maybe we could.
I think Alan had a comment.
Just a reflection on these metrics. I think we need a more specific metric on the investment piece, the infrastructure investment piece, private and public. I think there are ways to capture that information, but that's really the economic development piece of that, of those indicators, and that is an indicator of increasing the valuations in the city and taxes and so on.
Yes, and that would have to be a part of every project to deliver those measures. I want to make one observation, Dan. If I'm looking at a market for any of the target industries that we're talking about for a client, I'm here. I'm not there. I always start here. If I'm looking at target industries for my client, I'm not only here, but I could find that all by myself. Thank you very much. I don't need you to help me with this. And if you don't like what I'm finding, that's the message that Dan and I are trying to send. All right, how is this restaged, which what all you are talking about now? How do you get down to that next level that shows, number one, let's look at education, high school better, dropout rates, that there is a trend line going up, and there's a supply team of all of our leaders that are committed to make it go to say, not only is it trending up today, it's going to trend up for 20 years. If you want to look at the specific strategies for capital investment, if you want to look at utilities, obviously we want to get down to the next level in utilities. The message is 2020 targets can be pretty big if you want them to be. That's daring, actually, getting 10 years. This is usually you see 30 and 40 years. So this is saying, let's put the gauntlet down and move indicators. But heads up, this is what it is, and it's regional across the board. If you don't like aggregation, sorry. Get down to that next level as quickly as possible and say, we've got the most renewable portfolio for target industry companies to manage in the planet. Let's do that. So I think that's the point Dan's trying to get across here as well, right? We just make it, Dan, if you clip through them. Yeah.
Feedback that we're looking for.
It only hints at the whole area of what we do in this building and what Bill does with the REB and across the region in terms of working with adults, individuals who've been outside the educational system, and certainly there are many of those here in the city of Holyoke and next door in the city of Springfield. So I think we need to be a little bit more specific, unless it's covered someplace else that I haven't noted.
So tell me what you have in mind in terms of a strategy or an action based in terms of what you're describing.
There's a host of strategies, and again, you're standing in one of them. this floor and the floor below, all sorts of activity going on, focused on adults in terms of teaching them English, getting them GEDs, putting them at least one step closer to being eligible for the workforce, if you will. It's an unfortunate fact of life that in this region in particular, in the cities, there's all sorts of adults who need access to the educational system and don't have it.
I just want to piggyback for a moment on what Bill said, because I think what might be missing here is there is this public workforce development system that probably serves 4,000 or 5,000 people, 2,000 in this general Holyoke area. And maybe it's what we sometimes, when you say pre-K through 12 education improvement, it almost refers to the institutional system that's currently in place. Whereas in addition to that, there is a community education system in place that deals with one of the most difficult problems on education, which is literacy, adult literacy. And that doesn't seem to be, that statement doesn't seem to be comprehensive enough. The second bullet is the seamless regional talent delivery system. Yeah, once you start that, it seems again that you're trying to align the workforce development system with the vocational system, as we talked about that, and with the community college system and other higher ed. That's more on that alignment system. I think something needs to be in maybe the first statement, something I think that you're referring to, Bill, what goes on in this building every day, which is really sometimes called adult basic education or community education. And it's very big. And it's dramatically needed here and in Springfield, almost more than any other region of the Commonwealth. The numbers are the data will show you how dramatic that is. So I think, and that's where some of this workforce is going to come from.
Right, and what I think I just heard were a couple of volunteers to help us both enhance and flesh out some of the...
talent delivery system.
Yes.
Right.
To be all of the above.
Yeah.
And I think that's a consensus we need to reach.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah, sorry, it's Eric Nakajima again. And one of the things that, building off of both Bill, I guess you're both called Bill, with both Bill's comments, is organizing. I mean, this is look. You guys are doing a good job of getting this stuff up there and challenging the group. I think one of the difficulties in talking from PowerPoint slides is that it's difficult to disaggregate or organize the phenomena you're talking about in ways that have a logical sequence. So, for example, there are foundational issues around bringing the skill level up, either of the adult population or of the outcomes within our K-12 system, more generally at a much higher level. And with all due respect, in the long run for economic development, that is absolutely essential for the region. Now, the thing is, that doesn't in any way diminish the fact that you have an immediate need and potentially to improve the delivery of workforce development services that meet companies as they come in the door now. And so the seamless system to be able to meet that company and know that you're being able to do it, measure you're doing it, and then market yourself as having the facility and capacity to meet the immediate business needs of either companies that are expanding here or wish to locate here. And so you need to do one of them? No, actually you need to do both of them. And one of them is frankly a fairly long-range urgent project. Urgent, but the measurable outcomes are likely to be over a number of years. Right. Another one is something that is an immediate challenge to say, if you can't demonstrate to a company, either here or that could come here, that you can meet their workforce needs tomorrow in a seamless way that matches their training needs, then they'll go elsewhere. And so that's something you have to perform on immediately. I'm only saying this because my guess is when we go to these other slides, this is a problem that's going to recur, that we just need to define where we have sort of foundational ecosystem goals and where we have strategic goals, both of which are urgent, both of which are sequenced.
Right, and I would just add that all along we envision having more near-term and longer-term, strategies, and I think Eric just talked that through pretty well. It also gets to Jim's point about how big is our project. So for example, when it comes to reforming, or whatever word we choose to use for pre-K to 12 education, and we recognize that people can get to the MCAS scores, so that's a long-term issue for economic development. This project in and of itself will not likely provide all the details to get there. But it can highlight the issue, and it can start the progress and some of the collaborators to further work there.
Well, and the global leaders of education policy reform are here. They're executing their work in other places. So, I mean, we got the family of experts here in terms of how are we going to change what's happening at the site for education. They just think they're applying it all over the world, and this needs to be the innovation valley for that kind of thing too. Dan, you'll just make it if you pick it up.
Any
Yes, sir.
comment?
I don't have specific comments on this. It's so general and so overwhelming, to be honest with you. I wonder whether you can recommend a process or a methodology to select some of these projects or initiatives based on return on investment or outcomes or impact that will help reduce it to a more manageable set of activities. And the second comment is many of these activities are happening in parallel by partner organizations,
Yep.
unrelated. And going back to the initial question, how to create some kind of an entity that has the authority to coordinate and maybe influence some of these indirectly related activities.
Well, the institutional question is I think one that I'm not going to try to dip into too much right now. I think that your comment about, and this happens in most economic development strategies, is that you end up, if you do your work, you end up with a lot of different ideas of things that need to be improved, and sometimes that can feel a little bit overwhelming at first, and part of our job is to try to prioritize some things, showcase what can be done more near-term, long-term. Kathy, did you want to add something?
I just want to say with this slide, these are everything that we have in the urban renewal plan. These are all infrastructure improvements that are in an urban renewal plan that our redevelopment authority will be carrying out.
Okay.
We need to add the airports.
What is, I'm happy to, what is the strategic idea?
Well, to develop industry, you need to consider the airports. Westover is a big one. What is it, a 12,000 foot runway? Westfield, 9,000 foot. Bradley, right within a half hour. I mean, that's key, it seems to me.
I agree. What we're focused on here are what we're going to do to improve things. Maybe we need to better market that. I guess I'm open to those ideas.
Connect the bus to the airport.
That is part of the project. There is a connection between the Windsor Lock Station and the airport property.
Right.
And you started the meeting by saying you'd like feedback. Glad we got through the whole thing, because from 30,000 feet, you've done an awful lot of work in a short period of time. What's your expectations from the committee in the next 10 days?
Good question, and we did talk about this a little bit beforehand. In the near-term expectation for the committee is that the document that was sent out a couple days before the meeting, I'd like a 10-day turnaround with any specific comments, feedback, and I would welcome, areas where people would like to get into more specifics about the different ideas. So either you have some ideas that you want to share, or you'd like to talk with one of us, about what could be done in this area. We've tried to lay this out. There's some independent, research that we're going to be doing, but we want this task force to be closely involved in the development of the strategy and providing input. So,
Do you expect to break down in certain
committee work or certain, well, I know you expect action steps, but do you want some indication from the committee as to who's interested in what?
Yeah, and so the other thing that I was going to get at, and quite frankly, in the run-up to this meeting, we just haven't finalized it enough, but is that after this meeting, we're going to do a follow-up communication to the task force with our thoughts on, similar to the idea of doing some strategic workshops. I'm guessing there's some people in the room who might be interested in those two topics. I think there may be a couple of other topics where we want to go deeper with the task force. So give us a chance over the next week or so to come back with some more specific ideas on how on that. But thank you for the question. Appreciate your interest.
Dan, once we have our June 8 meeting, and then I assume coming out of that, whatever finished product results, will part of that finished product, and I guess this gets back to the organization issue of before, then lay out at least a recommended plan of action going forward, so we just don't have a document with a lot of good ideas?
Yes, and I'll give Don a chance to respond as well. The quick answer is yes. Our intention all along was to make this action-oriented with specific actions, but also responsible parties. So it has to get into the specifics, and it won't be. We felt like we needed to go a little bit high level at this point so we can dive more deeply into the right topics. But yes, that is the intention. Don, do you want to add anything to that?
No, we'll be talking about how to operationalize the plan. Once there's a consensus, it's not worth doing without that. I'm with you.
I guess maybe I had a related question. As I look at this presentation and the report, Jim and I and Jeff and others do communicate back to our university sponsors. Should I take this as the framework that we should start using to think about what we can do and, quite frankly, what we can't to be useful, or should we wait for 8 weeks? Either answer is fine with me. I just wanted to make sure that we had the right framework marked.
I don't know if I'm the official arbiter of that, John, but I mean, my thought is that pretty quickly I can turn around a revised version based on some of the feedback today. So if we wanted to do something more near term, and I think people in the community in the region are obviously eager to partner with the consortium, so sooner I think is probably better than later. I don't know, Bob, did you want to?
But John, you're not talking about making sort of hard and fast sort of organizing decisions. I think if you're talking about that, then for one thing, since Dan and Don have invited input from the task force, you'd want to make sure that you had a revised document to work on that more accurately reflected what the group is saying they think their high-level goals are.
Okay, so that says, I'm not the way kind of person, but it's more like 8 weeks than today.
But it's more, or even just more like 2 weeks.
Yeah.
But the point is, I personally would be very upset if you ended up forwarding this document and somebody looks at it and they end up going through the same kind of exercise we did here today, in which if you simply waited 2 weeks, you could get another document that was revised.
You underestimate me. I completely got that. But if it's 2 weeks, we're pretty close. And that's really what I was trying to understand to where we're headed.
I think if we're not, then actually I would say this, my personal invitation to the group would be, if we're not, you really need to give that feedback to the chairs and to Dan and Don. I mean, if they're way off base with what's up here, they need to know that. If not, this is going to start moving down a path in which effectively, in general, the kind of goals and priorities that you're seeing there will still be the same ones a couple of weeks from now. And if people don't like that and think that's really the wrong thing to do, they really need to weigh in now.
That's good. That answers the question. Yes,
On the workshops, I have a feeling this is in the works anyway, but just to be explicit about it, that there's going to be a follow-up on the education session that Alan and Bob Holyoke hosted.
Right. Yeah, I guess well, yes, I was assuming that your group was following up.
Just a quick question. Last time you identified 6 or 7 regions or specific places that you're going to look into. Is your presentation reflecting some testing that you did toward, with regards to competitiveness or relative to other regions as well?
So the 6 or 7 regions, the like other communities and some case studies. Yeah, I mean, Don and his team and our partner Barry Bluestone at Northeastern, who gave us a paper that informed this work on basically findings and best practices as it related to innovation districts in other parts of the country. So it's embedded here, but I haven't decided not to specifically go through those individual
We
case
could publish
studies,
it to the
but-
team in the interim as a learning document, once it's ready to go.
Yeah, I think we can.
Yeah, and it's, the ones we did were catalyst-driven communities. Some were, relatively small or districts of large communities where they went, this must be something that will ripple. Sound familiar? And how they dealt with it. And it's got winners and losers in it, too. So we could just publish it to everybody.
More importantly, how are we in a comparative way or competitive way to other places? Once we implement all of this, are we going to be best in class? Are we going to be competitive in attracting industry?
Yes, sir, I do. And that's why we keep going back to those scorecards and the due diligence from me and my team, especially in terms of site decisions and expansions. We'll go right there. But from the demand-driven, from the business-driven point of view, what do they want now? One of the opportunities we have is that the global economy, as you ramped up into this, changed. And so some of the rule books are changing. So we get to start fresh in some of these fields. The expectations for a digital industry cluster are shifting now, and in some ways shifting to our favor, because there's things that are happening on an onshore basis. Tim?
I want to interrupt because we're going to start losing folks. My question for all of us is, this blockbuster meeting we're doing in June, when is the document that we're all going to have to dig into going to be available? I don't think it can be available 24 hours or 2 days before. This thing has to be out there a good week to 10 days to let folks.
Yeah, we agree.
Okay. So everyone will get this document. We'll need to drill into it so that 4 or 5 hours is productive.
With the homework assignment, right?
Yeah,
With the homework
absolutely.
assignment, the questions for that document, that's laid out to guide people's review.
Right, and so, Tim, for example, if we were going to be looking at a different week other than the week that has June 8th, just candidly, my reaction would be more likely to be a week later than a week earlier.
Have to be later for me. I think we better stay with Jake, with the 8th, and we'll do some sort of accommodation to help Bill.
Okay.
John, did you have any quick update before we close?
Sorry to give you no
Other
time
than
again.
what you contributed?
I hate to be keeping people. For those who are looking at the site, there were actual cement mixers down there a couple of weeks ago, which is actually a pretty big deal for us. I think Richard can comment more accurately on when the site remediation is going to start absolutely positively for sure this time.
Yeah. Well, the bid process is done.
Yeah.
They're really now getting into the work.
Yeah, so notice to proceed is out.
Mobilizing,
Yeah.
notice to proceed is out. There will not look like a lot happening perhaps for a while, because a lot of what they do typically in a demo project is inside the building. They're taking out asbestos and so forth, and it's not very visible. They don't come the first day with a wrecking ball. But that's coming.
Other kind of key milestones for us, we actually handed a very large package of site approval plan documentation into the planning department yesterday. So we get to actually experience the permitting process over the next, we'll find out how many weeks. And internally, kind of on the what you don't see is we also passed a very major milestone in the design process Still, for those who keep asking the question, haven't finished the exterior of the building design, but the interior of the building is a lot more locked down than it was even a month ago, which actually keeps us ahead of schedule for being able to start construction, hopefully when Richard's crew is done, but we're even thinking about overlapping that a little bit to give ourselves on track. Just a couple of thoughts.
Questions for John?
John, do you have a legal entity, what is it, with everybody, must have put some money into it by now.
Indeed. Or at least the people that were about to.
Various partners have invested in a legal entity, and what is it?
Yes, so the Massachusetts Green High Performance Computing Center Incorporated, which is a 501c3 Massachusetts corporation.
Invested in it, of course, because you're getting paid,
I should go check now that yes, so the universities have put up money. We've concluded agreement with the state, and yeah. So there's if you're worried about money to make the project follow through, the answer is yeah, we've got that.
You have the commitments necessary.
Yeah.
That's what I always check first.